Today on The Big Story, tsunami of disaffection washes over Hong Kong elections, landslide win for pro-democracy parties. The government invokes POFMA, the fake news law, for the first time. Find out more. And finally, the dark side of K-pop. Goo Hara found dead in her home on Sunday. Hello and welcome to The Big Story, where we'll discuss the top news of today and explain why it matters. I'm Kimberly Jiao, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. After almost 6 months of street protests, the tsunami of disaffection helped pro-democracy parties ride the wave to a landslide win in Hong Kong's district council elections. People voted in record numbers as the election is seen as a barometer of support for Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam. And the message couldn't have been clearer. By noon, the pro-democracy camp had won 17 out of the 18 district councils, taking more than 340 seats. And with such an overwhelming win, pro-democracy Democrats will have a big say in selecting Hong Kong's next chief executive. In a statement released by Mrs. Lam, she said, "The government will definitely listen humbly and reflect on the people's opinion." Joining us now live from Hong Kong is regional correspondent Elizabeth Law. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Kim.
So my first question is, was this a watershed election?
Well, I suppose to that you can say yes and no, because firstly, this is the district council, which is the equivalent of it in Singapore is town council. This is the lowest rung of elected officials in the Hong Kong political system. So these people who are elected, they will deal with very grassroots types things like noise complaints, like where the bus stops are going to be, like town improvements. Just that in Singapore we don't vote for them, but in Hong Kong you do. But yes, because this seems to have been a turning point in the unrest. In the days leading up to the elections, we've actually seen that people have calmed down, and we don't see protests being as violent as they have in the past months, in fact. So at the end of the day, I would be, sorry to cut you off, but at the end of the day, I would be cautiously optimistic to say that this could be a turning point.
I see. So was there sort of a generational divide in the way the Hong Kongers voted?
Well, the fact is that we don't have the numbers to back that up yet, because I mean the election was just last night. The polls closed at 10:30 and counting went on till basically noon today, and so that we don't have the actual breakdown of how people voted. But going into these elections, we knew that the younger people tended to be a bit more pro-democracy. They tend to be bit more anti-government, anti-Beijing, and the older generations have traditionally been the stronghold of the pro-Beijing establishment parties. But what we do know is that there have been a wave of new sign-ups for people to vote, because in Hong Kong you have to register to become a voter, unlike in Singapore where voting is compulsory and you're automatically registered to vote. So here we know that in the last year, a lot more people signed up to vote, and these were the additional votes that actually pushed the pro-democracy councillors across the line and helped them to have this massive win.
Oh, wow. So, now that this sort of pro-democracy bloc is firmly in charge of the district council, will it, make any difference? Because after all, the future of Hong Kong is sort of still decided by the powers that be in Beijing.
Well, again, a caveated answer, yes and no. I would say that yes, to a certain extent, because you have to remember that even though they are just district councillors, they are not legislative councillors, which is the next level where you actually get to vote on laws and to make laws and change laws. They also have about 120 something seats on the electoral committee. Now, this electoral committee is 1,200 strong. It's made up of members across Hong Kong society, and these are the people that choose the chief executive. So Chief Executive Carrie Lam was chosen by one such committee, and so they could influence the committee in a certain way, but still 120 out of 1,200, that is quite little. But at the same time, also obviously, this has sent a message to the government here, to the government in Beijing, to show that, look, all that you have done in the last 5 months, the policies that have been made, obviously people here are not reacting as well to them as they hoped, and maybe it would change the way policy on Hong Kong is made. Now, it's early days yet, but I think we can all be slightly hopeful.
I see. Well, it remains to be seen, as you mentioned. Well, but thank you for taking the time to share more with us, Liz, and do stay safe where you are.
Thank you.
You can access more of Liz's analyses on Hong Kong or have a look at the full election results on straitstimes.com. Now, for the first time, the government has cracked down on fake news using the fake news law, also known as POFMA for short. Opposition Progressive Singapore Party member Brad Boyer has been directed to correct a Facebook post he made earlier this month. The post had questioned the independence of Temasek and GIC. Mr. Boyer was required to carry in full the correction notice at the top of his Facebook post. The Ministry of Finance said in a separate release, Mr. Boyer's post contains clearly false statements of fact and undermines public trust in the government. It is necessary to state this for the record. GIC and Temasek operate on a commercial basis, and the government is not involved in their individual investment decisions. With us today to share his insights is news editor Zakir Hussain. Hi, Zakir. My first question is, what is your personal opinion about this?
Well, I think it was a matter of time before the POFMA is applied. And I think what we saw today was sort of an example of how POFMA was applied. Sort of basically, Mr. Boyer was not directed to take down his post. That's not the intention of POFMA. Rather, he had to post prominently on his site the correction or clarification from the Ministry of Finance. And I think it's good that this examples sort of come up, because I mean that people had people had been wondering when POFMA was going to be put into place as well. And here's an example, because actually a lot of falsehoods have been or are being peddled on social media. But this was, I think, a clear example where misleading statements as well as figures were put out to undermine public trust in the government. And I think we might expect to see more such instances of POFMA being applied in the coming months, I guess.
Oh, okay. So now that, POFMA has sort of been used for the first time, what is the reaction out there by observers? It's
mixed, I think. If you look at comments on the Straits Times Facebook page as well as observers, I think it's sort of a welcome move, because Mr. Boyer's post had been out there for more than a week, in sort of 13th November without being corrected. And now that the government sort of checked its facts and sort of put out the information out there, I think that should add some clarity to the discourse. And I think as we head, closer to an election season, you're going to see more examples of this. And I think it's not, not uncoincidental that Mr. Boyer is, involved in politics as well. I think you might expect some more of these claims to come about in the coming months.
Oh, okay. So maybe the first time, but won't be the last.
Yeah. Quite certainly it won't be the last. In fact, Mr. Boyer has come out to counter his, make further clarifications, but that's still quite live, so we'll see how that plays out.
I see. Well, thanks for coming on to share more with us, Zakir. And for more stories on local politics, they are available on straitstimes.com. And now let's move on to What's Trending, where Dylan will share with us what's buzzing in the internetverse. Dylan?
Thanks, Kim. It's time for What's Trending. First up, Singapore has bagged a few wins at the Golden Horse Awards. Widely known as the Mandarin-speaking world's Oscars, the Golden Horse Awards gave nods to local films Wet Season and A Land Imagine. Yo Yan Yan bagged the Best Actress Award for performance in Anthony Chen's Wet Season, while Yeo Siew Hua's A Land Imagine won Best Original Screenplay and Best Original Film Score. That's not all. Even politicians got in on the action, with Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat and Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, Grace Fu, expressing their congrats on Facebook. Congrats, guys! Next, a case of mistaken identity? More like a misunderstanding of an embarrassing kind. A birthday bash at W Singapore in Sentosa Cove went horribly wrong after deodorant powder was mistaken for drugs by hotel staff. According to the hotel guest, Ms. Sharonia Peruntu, she and her friends had called the staff for help. Two of her friends had gotten stuck in the bathroom and ended up breaking the glass door. The staff then spotted the bag of powder and, without asking her what it was, called the police. The teenager and her friends were held under arrest for 14 hours while test procedures were carried out before being released. And finally, shattered expectations. Tesla's futuristic Cybertruck launch got off to a rough start when its armoured glass windows shattered during its official unveiling. The armoured glass shattered when it was hit with a metal ball in a series of pre-planned tests for the crowd. Ouch! It doesn't seem like the launch suffered much of a setback though. Tesla says it's received more than 150,000 pre-orders so far, with production due to begin in 2021. Let's hope they fix the glass panels by then. Now that's all for What's Trending today. If you've seen a story you want to share, link it in the comment section below. Back to you, Kim.
Thanks, Dylan. Next up, K-pop idol Goo Hara was found dead at her home in South Korea on Sunday. Investigations are currently underway to determine the cause of death. Earlier in May, she was found unconscious in what was seen as a suicide attempt, according to media reports. Goo Hara's death comes 1 month after close friend and fellow K-pop star Sulli took her own life. Fans lamented her death, with some blaming the South Korean entertainment industry for placing pressure on its celebrities. Here with us today, we have journalist Jan Lee to share more with us. Hi Jan, thanks for coming down. Unfortunately, you're joining us to talk about yet another tragedy in the celeb world today. Because about a month ago, we spoke about Sulli, right? And her struggle with sort of online bullying, which then led to her death. But this case is slightly different.
Yes, there are similarities, but some of the issues brought up are a little bit different. So, like Sulli, I think Hara was the subject of a lot of malicious comments. She was the subject of a lot of media scrutiny. But this was in part because last year she brought her ex-boyfriend, a hairdresser called Choi Jong-boom, to court. And apparently they fought one another, and he threatened to release an intimate video of her that he took during their relationship. So there's some talk that she was not aware when she was being taped. I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is. Nobody also really knows what the video was about, but presumably they were in a sexual situation. Maybe she wasn't not fully clothed, because he never actually went through with the threat. So the video never was actually leaked, thankfully. Though the video was not leaked, I think when news came out, people obviously tried to search for the video. There were also some comments made. As we know, victims of sexual crimes often get comments like, why were you doing that? Were you asking for it? Yeah, things like that. So it was not the most supportive online culture that could have been there for her. We don't know if Hara took her own life yet. Investigations are still ongoing, but it seems likely that she died of a suicide. And given that the period of time she took her ex-boyfriend to court, that was a very lengthy and public trial. So obviously that added some stress to her. I think it would to anybody. And her ex was also given only a suspended jail sentence. Oh. Yes, which means that he was sentenced to 1.5 years jail, suspended for 3 years, which basically means that if he behaves himself within those 3 years, then he doesn't actually have to go to jail for 1.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's quite a lenient. Yeah, it's a very lenient sentence. So maybe perhaps that also made her feel, dismissed. Of course, that's all speculation at this point.
I see.
Yeah.
We see this sort of seems like a reflection of a bigger problem, right? With when it comes to the proliferation of revenge porn and sort of non-consensual pornography. Surely something's being done about this in South Korea.
It's described as an epidemic in South Korea. Yeah.
Okay.
It's called mocha. What happened to Hara was not exactly mocha. Mocha is sort of the use of hidden cameras to film someone. I don't think that's what happened to Hara. And there are quite a few high-profile cases of mocha or unconsensual sex videos. So I think the most high-profile one was recently, this year actually, Jang Jun-young, singer Jang Jun-young, confessed to taping several women that he had slept with without consent and then distributing those videos to his friends, which included celebrities like Choi Jong-hoon, people like that. So that was something that I think shocked a lot of people because, you know, it involves celebrities. There are more high-profile cases. I think 1,600 or so guests in a hotel were filmed because there was hidden cameras in the hotel rooms.
Right.
This was both men and women, and you can assume, you know, what people do in hotel rooms changing.
Right.
Maybe they were in intimate situations with their partners. Also, apparently, I think a few years back, a swimming coach resigned because male swimmers installed hidden cameras in the female swimmers' lockers. So yeah, so it's really an epidemic. It has happened a lot of times, and I think last year there was a big protest in Korea where women went to the streets and were like, "My life is not your pawn." So that was the slogan, because it happens everywhere. It's like public toilets, hotels, as we've talked about, and they have. I think South Korea actually has people patrolling toilets with detectors.
Oh.
So they're trying to find out, are there cameras here, you know. There's an entire team of regulators who watch porn online every day
Just to make
to try and make sure that this pornography is not of someone who is unconsenting.
Right.
It's not a hidden camera video. So you can imagine clearly there's a big debate around all of this. There's very big controversy around all of this. Women feel like their concerns are dismissed. Women feel unsafe, uncomfortable, and they feel like the authorities aren't doing enough, because I think the number of hidden camera illegal filming cases were over 6,000 in 2017. And I think in 2012 there was only about 2,400 cases. So it really went up, and a lot of them go away scot-free. So a lot of these perpetrators, I think in 2017, apparently of all the 5,000 something hidden camera related suspects were male, I think only 100 or so of them got booked on charges. So it's painful, I think, for a lot of these victims to feel like they have no outlet. And people have suggested that after what Hara went through, even going to a not public, but a very lengthy trial, and being somebody in a position of, I would consider fame and power, or what people consider to be fame and power, she still could not get a verdict that seemed to serve justice. So I think some people feel like that might have a chilling effect on women reporting on such crimes.
So it truly is an epidemic, like you said, and that's kind of terrifying, and it's upsetting that this has happened.
Yes.
But thank you so much for coming down to sort of share more with us, Jan. And if you happen to be struggling with mental health issues, do know that you are not alone, and you can seek help using the helplines that we've put on the screen now. And those were the top stories of the day. For more news and videos, do head on to our website at straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Kimberly Jiao. Join us tomorrow for more of The Big Story.